related to revenue generation, be they, marketing and sale of property for development for hotels, like this property is going through the Surplus Lands Act process now. There's a lot of economic opportunity study efforts underway in this budget, as well as is funding for the consultant expertise to look at tax increment financing districts, which is a longer term mechanism to increase revenue for the city. So there's really the city's doing everything possible, including regular economic development activities for sales tax generation, and those efforts need to continue. They're very critical for the future. And that's why, going back to City Council Budget Strategy number 3, which is we really focus on those tasks that are looking at trying to build revenue for the city into the future.
But my other question is, are we following through? Like, yes, you can implement something or have a study, but are we following through, or we just doing the studies and putting them away? It is important that we follow through.
I don't recommend doing studies and just putting them away. Our intention is to do studies and follow through, like the recommendations in the Economic Opportunities Study, which many of these actions are fulfilling those recommendations.
Are there questions, or do we want to do public comment?
For a change, I'm going to wait till after public comment before engaging in my favorite topic.
Okay. Mary, did you have anything? No. Okay. I wanted to double check on what I think I remember regarding some delaying some expenses as one possible source of funding for council priorities. And that was related to fire equipment fund allocation. So the turnout uniforms, the turnout gear is due for replacement, like expiration date, kind of due for replacement in 27, 28. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And has there been a fund set? Have we been putting money in a fund up till this point?
Yes.
Allocating funding for that?
With this current allocation of 125,000, which is already in the budget, so the fund balance for the fund is about 330,000 currently.
And do we know what we're going to need for that request? I know I should have asked that question before, but I'm just curious.
Sure.
Since it's alternative funding strategies for council consideration, what would the impact be? And also with relation to the self-contained breathing apparatus replacements in 6 years. I'm assuming these allocations were planned out on a straight line basis. Like in 6 years, we need to spend some amount of money for these breathing apparatuses. Here's how much we need to set aside every year to have the money. Yes?
Yes, so we have projected about, with the SCBA's, there's about 22 units that will need to be replaced, and they're purchased all at once. And that's going to be a cost of upwards of $300,000 for that. So working with the North County Fire, they wanted us to start planning for that purchase, so giving us advance notice, and that's why the City of Pacifica has created the fund in order to put aside funding. The turnout gear, that's a smaller cost, but still a cost. It's going to be about $150,000 as of today's date. Of course, as we know, as time goes on, those costs increase as, inflationary increases happen. Those are the two right now that we're planning for, and of course, there could be other things that come up, but as of now, those are the two pieces.
125 and 325, did you say?
No, 330 and 150.
And how much is in that fund right now?
330.
Oh, is in the fund.
Yeah, with the current proposed allocation.
Yes, 332 with this 125. So if you choose not to fund it this year, you need to subtract 125.
So that's 207,000 current balance.
And I'll add that regarding replacement of this equipment, I do believe in previous years we were able to apply some grant funding towards those. I don't remember the specifics, and I'm not sure of the current grant status for those, but it might be a possibility in the future.
Okay. And is there any knowledge about purchasing in a bulk way, like with other departments in the county? Is that how that's generally done? Thank you. Chief, please come forward. Thank you. I figured you might have more knowledge about this than I do. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I would have asked Mr. Abelson to come up had I seen him here.
I was hiding in the back
Thank you for
there.
being here. You can
Thank
speak
you.
to that.
Yeah, Joel Abelson, Deputy Fire Chief, North County Fire Authority. To answer your question is that we always look at those types of strategies. Traditionally, because we're on a 5-year replacement plan for a 10-year, the turnouts actually last 10 years, but we have to have 2 of them, so every 5 years we purchase them. So it's hard to kind of get on the same page with other departments, but we always look for that. There's grants out there that we apply for, but until we get to that fiscal year, we don't know. So these are things that we really have to do, so that's why we put the funding in ahead of time. So it's not if we get in that position, we don't have to be worried about funding it. This is life safety equipment.
Through the chair, can I ask this gentleman a question, please?
Please.
Is it true that there are known carcinogens in your current turnouts?
Is that true?
Yes.
I think there's studies out there questioning that.
Because it's my understanding that there's PFAS in there and that it's actually a risk to the firefighters.
Yeah, I think that's a concern out there, for sure, and that's something we need to consider.
What we're talking about is life safety. We're talking about asking people to go into burning buildings to save us and not giving them the proper equipment to go in there with. I find that unthinkable, just to be clear.
Yeah, I think that, and that's going to be a consideration, I think, when we go to purchase the next group, definitely. And, that could impact cost, too. So, those are, we don't know what the new set of technology is going to cost. So, we're just trying to do our best to kind of keep ahead of it.
Last week, I gave Ron the vendor that supplies those very suits, so.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much for that.
Yep.
I had one fire-related question.
Oh,
Maybe it's
go ahead.
more for staff, but I know we've been playing into a fund for a new fire engine that we need to save up for. And I think staff answered that that's part of the debt service fund, right? So that is included in here, but it's
It is
just
already
not.
included, yes.
And how much are we putting into that?
That,
On the fire truck itself,
And what's that fund balance and when do we need a fire truck?
so this is for the one that we're going to be receiving next fiscal year. So
Right,
the
that
debt
we've
service
purchased.
payments are starting July 1st.
Uh-huh.
And let me pull up the.
while Marisol is pulling it up, so we typically include all debt service payments in the base budget. And we have a debt service schedule, so we usually just follow the schedule when
Okay.
the payments are due and include it.
Yeah, so in the first year, it's going to be 125,000, first year being fiscal year 25, 26. That's what I remember.
Oh, I thought we'd put money in last year, but maybe we just approved the whole idea, but.
We did, but we didn't know exactly at the budget adoption time, we didn't know how the financing will work, so we did allocated some funds, but it will not be needed, essentially, so we changed the strategy how we're
Okay.
going to fund.
So we'll be paying this for some time after the vehicle has arrived?
That service will start this fiscal year,
Uh-huh.
and the vehicle will arrive the following year, right? That's how we.
Yeah.
That's good, thank you. Just want to make sure you have what you need.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no further, there are though. Mary?
Yeah, I'm just curious about the OPEB trust contribution. So if we were to take money out of that, say $25,000, perhaps for Fog Fest, then what would the impact be there?
Well, I'm not prepared to say exact impact on unfunded liability, but typically the way it works, every time we contribute towards the OPEB, other post-employment benefit trust, these assets of the fund counted against the unfunded liabilities. So when we close the books this fiscal year, we will count and take a credit for all the contributions towards the unfunded pension liability plus the normal cost. And it's usually determined by actuaries through actuarial valuation, which we do every as required to determine this. So the impact will be, well, it will be an impact if we unfunded, but at the same time, it is a city funds, right? It's our assets. So it's a council's policy decision for what priorities you want to allocate it to.
Thank you.
Greg, I turned off that light. Was that from before?
That was to speak about fire.
Okay, great. All right. Let's open public comment then. I have two cards, John Beckmeyer and Brian Renero.
Good evening. I'm John Beckmeyer. My role as of late has been the president of the Fog Festival. I've held this title for about a year and a half, coming in and running last year's Fog Fest and looking at running this year's Fog Fest. As most of you probably have heard, we almost lost Fog Fest last year due to financial issues. Also, we had a huge departure of members of our board, and our community groups fell off rather dramatically. We were able to pull together a really strong board and implement a sponsorship committee that did miracles last year. And then we also undertook a lot of cost reductions, and that got got us through Fog Fest. A very big part of it was the city's donation of $25,000 to the Fog Fest. That was huge, it was material, and it really made a very big difference to our success. A big part of our expenses comes from public safety, and it's an absolutely necessary cost, and we wouldn't want to diminish the level of safety we provide for the public. It's a quite uncertain cost, given how it gets staffed. We accept that, and we understand that we sort of have to roll with what numbers we get for our public safety officers. The other big part of it that comes from, or used to come from the city of Pacifica, was Public Works. They requested that we outsource it. We have outsourced what our city's Public Works people used to do. In essence, we now write a check to a different agency, but we still write that check for those same services. One of the things that makes Fog Fest different, I think, from a lot of other groups in our town is we are somewhat an umbrella organization, and a lot of groups are underneath us. Our mission is to provide support and funding for nonprofit organizations. Historically, we've probably covered 55 organizations. Last year, we had 33 organizations. We wrote checks totaling $88,000 to nonprofits and community groups at the end of the Fog Fest last year. Our early sponsorship activity makes us think we're going to come in lower than we did last year. We have some unexpected expenses this year that are, well, uncertain, not unexpected. We're doing some enhancements to improve the safety of the people on Palmetto. For instance, we're getting 16 portable vehicle barricades that we're going to put out there to stop traffic from coming through, even if they would have done so in the past. Our barricades are certainly going to be a whole lot beefier. I'm done, but I would like to hopefully thank the people in the city of Pacifica for contributing to Fog Fest and supporting us at the level of $25,000 this year. And I'll leave it to you guys to discuss how it's going to be done.
Thank you, Mr. Beckmeyer. Brian Renero, then Cindy Abbott, then Kimberly Finale.
Thank you, council members. Congratulations on your first 6 months. The work is very much appreciated. The difficulty is appreciated too. Thank you. Two minor things about the budget that I'd like to raise. First is the cost to inspect STRs as part of the 75K allocation or budget matter. That I'd ask City Council to direct staff to determine how much the fees, permit fees, would need to be to cover that. The city, the people of Pacifica shouldn't be subsidizing the cost to operate STRs or business costs and permits, and that includes permits. Second item is we need details on how platform accountability will be implemented and why the 75K is still articulated when staff has been directed to include platform accountability in the STR enforcement. Third issue is the bigger one. There is, in part of the budget, the request, the Economic Development Division reorganization, where the economic development system will be dismantled or significantly reduced and then shunted into a housing development strategy. In fact, what you see in the budget is kind of a philosophy of build. The only way that Pacifica can get revenue is through housing. If that were true, our own housing and property taxes would be funding our infrastructure today, which is not the case. We should be flush with cash because Pacifica already tends towards being a bedroom community. The fact of the matter is that if we add housing without properly addressing the cost to connect, the infrastructure costs, which include streets, sewage, utilities, that we're going to get ourselves further in the hole. Because if this had been a winning strategy, we wouldn't have this problem right now. We have sewer laterals that are spilling sewage into San Pedro Creek. How is increasing the load on those systems going to help us? How is it that, to what my wife said, when we have alerts and tsunami alerts and emergencies, how are our streets and infrastructures going to facilitate the movement of all of these new residents of Pacifica? We need a plan, right? A real plan that doesn't put all of their eggs in the basket of housing. Remember that the city manager just said it's impossible for him to predict what sales tax, described very bearishly, is going to perform in comparison to a property tax, which is always described very bullishly. So why would we make our community a monoculture where it's a housing farm and we're putting all of our revenue into just producing houses without thinking about the real long-term implementation and the long-term problems that this is going to raise? Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy Abbott and then Kimberly Finale.
Hello, Cindy Abbott, speaking as a Pacifica resident. And I'm just going to align myself with everything Brian Raniero just said. That saves me a lot of time and you guys some time too. I too am really concerned though about that realignment of economic development and moving away from what city councils for 10 years have been trying to do, look at ways to build commercial ventures here in the city. When you talk about using mixed-use development, there's almost no commercial use in any of those developments that have been talked about during the housing element. So things don't line up. So I hope as you continue talking, you put a lot of thought and conversation into that realignment and what is really happening with all the proposals. Maybe you need to have a presentation sooner than later about what actual steps are being done other than fees and financing districts, about the Great Economic Opportunities Report that was done. Where are we at developing the neighborhoods and making them places where Pacificans and visitors can enjoy shopping? That's some of the things that were in there that we haven't heard anything about for a really long time. Yes, and again, align myself with that information on short-term rentals. I think that maybe it could be less than amount of money if there's a really good communication plan out there with that platform accountability and appropriate fees for the operators who are benefiting from their homes being hotels. And I understand in budgeting, you don't know. I did it, by the way, for 20 years. That was my career, budgets of all types. So I understand that you put a number out there, and then you see what happens. And there's two really big numbers out there, 150,000 for the implementation of the adaptation plan, as well as to 150,000 to implement HEI3, which ties into developing the Sanchez Art Center campus. So maybe as you move forward with these projects, you can look at those in more detail. Not tonight, put that number in the budget, but find ways where you can reduce those expenses. You've heard the community voice. They do not want the art center to leave. They want it to remain. So could that $150,000 go down? And adaptation planning, really important, but make sure that we're looking at adaptation and resilience, not using it as an economic buffer, because adaptation is about how we're going to live with our shoreline. It's not about developing behind an hardened armored wall. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly Finale. And that's the last card that I have.
Good evening, council members, city staff. Shout out to our wonderful City of Pacifica clerk, who is always working hard and is, in my opinion, always underappreciated. So thank you for the work that you do, city clerk. Coffee. My name is Kimberly Finale. I'm here this evening speaking as a private resident. I want to thank the City Council for the hard work that you do. You are my community. It starts right here in this room for me. I come here to hear what my fellow community members have to say and to learn what they care about, and to hear your feedback on their comments is always a learning experience. And so I just wanted to start there by thanking you, and thank you for being such a loving presence here in this city. So to address the topic at hand, as far as this city's financial stability, it's not looking real stable. I have continued concerns to build on Brian's statement, and also in response to City Manager Woodhouse's statement that housing develops increased sales tax. I have a question mark there, because it's my opinion and those of business owners that it's successful businesses that increase sales tax. And the thing is that Pacifica wasn't built to be a moneymaker. Pacifica was built and intended to be a bedroom community, yet we have the third dirtiest beach in California, and I don't hear that being addressed here ever. A couple times over the past couple years, yet we remain in the top 5 dirtiest beaches, and you want to build more housing here. The kids can't swim here without taking a risk of getting sick and getting a bacterial infection. Believe me, it's not due to dog waste. It's due to sewage runoff from local streams. So let's address that before we start addressing building more housing for more kids that are going to go to the only beach that's safe to swim in and get some weird bacterial infection. We're not talking about that. And that is, it's a risk to public health. Councilmember Wright says it's unthinkable to ask for firefighters to go into a burning building without the best available equipment. I think it's unthinkable to send our kids to swim in the third dirtiest ocean in our beautiful state of California. It's time to talk about that and put our money towards that before bringing more families out here to swim in sewer. Thank you.
Thank you. Assistant City Clerk, do we have callers?
We have one raised hand. We have one raised hand. It is for Clifford Lawrence.
Hi, Cliff, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Mayor and Vice Mayor and City Council. I agree with much of what's already been said tonight. My concern is that some of what we seem to be doing is a gamble at a time that it's not a good time to gamble. We heard mentioned earlier this evening about the recognition on the part of the council of the higher probabilities of a reversal of funding promises from the federal government. There will be impacts on the state, and it's going to trickle down to us. How many studies are we farming out to consultants that we could do in-house? Why I'm concerned about the reduction in your housing fund, as other people have said, given that we have such dire constraints on us by the state in that area. Again, that 150,000 to study the city surplus land. I wish that the art center was not included in that. You could take that out. But then you've also got a problem with the beach center, Beach Boulevard, and because of the disclosures that would be involved there, what are the real prospects for that? But lastly, I'd just point out one other thing. The money that I believe 50,000 set aside to promote the library. Why? It's not improving the library. Maybe that money would be better spent somewhere else, maybe 25,000 for Fog Fest. I know you got a tough job, and I don't envy you, but I think that you can make there could be some better choices made, less risk of the city at a time that conservative viewpoints is probably in order. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no other raised hands.
All right, thank you. And I haven't received any other cards, so we'll close public comment. Bring it back to council for discussion and deliberation.
Can I just ask one clarifying
Of course.
question? So part of this agenda item was also the CIP. Are we going into that later, after we talk about the budget?
Well, the council discussed the CIP, new projects, and the additional funding request in the last session. So we included the CIP budget book for your review, and if the council wants to make any changes or if you have any questions, well, I believe Deputy Director Roland Yip is here, so he's happy to answer any questions related to projects.
Yeah, we didn't get all the individual forms about all the different projects before. When we reviewed it before, it was just the ones that you were bringing up. So there's a lot of new information in here. So, I mean, I think it's probably better to talk about the budget first.
Absolutely, yeah, no, that's part of the bigger budget discussion.
It's kind of hard to know where to start. There's so much here.
Well, actually, I have a question for you, Mayor Pro Tem. I know over at least 2 or 3 times you've mentioned developer fees. And I remember you asking about when we were going to look at that, because it was your thinking or your observation that perhaps some of our fees were low based on your work in other communities. So I want to first check, is that accurate? Is that what you were thinking?
And not just in other communities, but even here, like I think our local drainage fees, I looked at that on Vistamar, and I think those hadn't been updated in 25 years or so. So it's part of the reason there's no money for these projects, because we haven't been charging enough for a really long time. And then, fees for capital improvements, like there could have been fees that helped pay for the Civic Center, but because we weren't charging enough, we're having to take out loans, right, to pay for that instead. And then what scares me looking at the CIP actually is that a lot of things we're actually pushing down the road and saying we're going to do these in 2 years. Well, we don't have this money now. I doubt we're going to have all these millions of dollars in 2 years either. Right? So no, I think that's really critical, but that's only money that's coming from new development projects. But at least for the ones that are coming in, we make sure that they're paying, their fair share of, because we're going to have to improve parks with new people coming in. We're going to have to improve roads. The other question that comes with that is, are they paying enough just to tie in, or are they paying enough for the long-term maintenance, right? The deferred maintenance that we're behind on. And I'm guessing those kind of questions would come out when we actually get a proposal and start talking about the details of that fee study, and that's the time to ask for that. But I think that money is really critical to spend right now.
Okay. Thank you for answering that question, because that's generally where I was going. It seemed like, something that you'd been asking for and asking about for some time. I knew there was a plan to do it. I wasn't following and tracking exactly when, but seeing it as part of this budget proposal, you agree, it sounds like that is a good allocation of funds.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have a light from Mr. Wright.
Yes, thank you. I guess I could start with a real easy question. Could you speak to what efficiencies we might gain with that new HR thing that was up there that I forget how much it cost, but it sounded like a tracking program for efficiencies.
HR.
So it does, it is on unfunded list currently. And the proposal here is to essentially revamp the performance management and evaluation system and tie it more to the best practices and just make sure that it's aligned. But again, the reason why it's remaining unfunded at this point, so we want to give a little bit of time to evaluate where we are and maybe fund it in a future year or maybe bring it back at the mid-year.
Okay.
But we do have performance evaluation and management system in place. It's just outdated and not consistent throughout departments. So that the intent behind this request was kind of revamp it citywide and make it more cohesive.
Okay. And then I think everybody's heard me talk on this before, but I know we have a structural deficit of 3 and change. I personally believe that it's much higher than that. How many staff members are we short, Kevin, from a city of our size on average, would you say?
From the study that was done last year as part of budget development for this current fiscal year, the estimate was 30 to 40, and we added some positions last year, so we might be in 30 compared to the average of comparable jurisdictions in our area.
And in terms of competing salary-wise, on the average, what would you say, 13% underpaid?
On average, it's in that range. It can range from 5% below median to 30% below median.
And is it safe to say that, first of all, thank you so much to the rabbits that you guys are pulling out of hats. I would say that you've done an exceptional job trying to balance and wrestle a big alligator to try to make this thing happen. And I do appreciate all that you've tried to do. You've made some really challenging, difficult choices. But I would go so far. Would you say it's safe to say that you're having to go to extraordinary measures to balance the budget?
Yeah, as I started out saying, I think this is one of the more difficult years in the 8 budgets that I've done for Pacifica.
And is part of that not contributing towards our savings towards our pension obligations as well?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Is part of our consideration that we're thinking about not putting in quite as much towards pension obligations?
That's one of the balancing strategies that we're recommending, but there's 2 vehicles that we use for those trusts, and as was mentioned, the funding the OPEB relates directly more to our annual comprehensive financial statement and that liability, so that's more important.
So we're asking less employees to do more work for less money and not funding their pensions in order to try to balance the budget, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the last piece, not funding their pensions, that's, we are funding pensions, for sure. This is just the long-term liability, and Ms. Gomez or Ms. Carter could elaborate on that more if necessary, but it's a necessary financing accounting tool that cities have to acknowledge, is that unfunded liability.
Yeah. And then how many units are we mandated to build by the state that we have absolutely zero choice about? And what is the consequence to not doing that?
Yeah, it's around the 1900 number, 1982, I think it might be, that we're allocated. 1892, sorry. That we're allocated in our housing element through the regional housing needs allocation, that, we have to identify how those can be built. The city doesn't have to build them, but we have to identify that in our housing element and then work towards that.
And just spitball number, how much annual renewable revenue would that represent to our community?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers that I had used during the strategic planning right in front of me, but a general calculation, and others should chime in if you know more specifically, but just in terms of the assessed valuation increase of building new housing and property tax share that the city gets, building that number would be mid 3 million, 3.5 million or so annual property tax revenue per year if those units were built. That's factoring in average cost of average valuation of those houses, et cetera, that kind of estimate. And I should mention, just to that point, this is a data point and analysis and information that we're going to be working towards for the summertime study session on revenues.
The consequences of not doing these things?
Well, all you have to do is look back at the last 20, 30, 40 years in Pacifica and see the consequences of not doing these things, and you can see the financial condition that we're in now.
Speaking more to what is the state going to do to us if we don't follow their mandate?
Oh, you're talking about enforcement of the RENA number in the housing element in the next housing cycle? I think that's a big question that I'd turn to Community Development Director Updegrave or the city attorney if they might know more detail. I think that's a big question on every city's mind, is what's going to happen in the next housing element cycle if these RENA numbers are not met by cities. I don't have a easy answer for that.
Do you have any idea of what's happened in the past to other cities that haven't met previous RENA goals?
I can respond in part. I know that the state, the governor, the attorney general have made it clear that for cities who are not meeting their housing accountability goals and their RENA numbers, they will begin enforcement actions. And it will start with the Housing of Community Development, HCD, and they will begin their own administrative enforcement. And if that is not successful, they will then, it has happened down south, not up here predominantly, but the AG will file suits against cities who are not addressing their RENA obligations.
So it's safe to say they have a gun to our head?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Safe to say they have a gun to our head?
Yes, and in addition to a lawsuit, there's also fines and penalties that they can impose.
And can they take away local control over building activities?
Yes, in an extreme circumstance, if the city were to litigate it and eventually not prevail, yes, as an extreme remedy, the court could eliminate any local land use control from the cities, and it would be overtaken by the state.
I find that terrifying. Kevin, what percentage of our revenue stream comes from property tax?
Ms. Carter or Gomez could cite the exact percent, but I believe it's around 35%.
But that includes commercial property too.
Yeah, property, period.
Yeah.
I think it's more than that, but.
Yeah.
It's significant.
Yes, it's the largest revenue category for the city.
33, projected at 33% for this 25-26 year.
Okay. Also, I'm very much looking forward to entertaining that discussion in August about additional revenue generations, because I feel like I'm not doing my job if I don't give staff enough tools to be able to do a lot of these things. I can't imagine what it was like for you to have to go through and make these choices. I know when we go to appoint people to committees, how terrible it is to have to say no. And I empathize with you on a lot of the no's you had to say to the people you work with. And I just want to be clear about that. But I should probably be quiet and let some other people talk for a change.
Can I just clarify one thing?
Please.
So you mentioned the summer study session. Is that going to include an overview of the economic development study?
Opportunity.
Am I saying that right?
All right.
Just because Cindy had asked about that.
Sure, yeah, it hasn't been scoped out yet, but many of the recommendations in the economic opportunity study directly relate to revenue generation, and so we can touch on those, what those actions are and that we're following through on.
Thank you.
I didn't see much into generating revenue. I would like to see more. It seems like we have all our eggs in one basket, and I would like to see some diversification. And we have to start somehow, somewhere. And a lot of people, I've been visiting businesses, and a lot of people are suffering. And we need to figure it out how to help them, because property taxes increases only a certain amount every year. But a business, if it's working properly, can generate more than that. So we're not just counting with, I would say 1% or so every year. So we might be, and this is one of the things that I think we need to focus on, other source of revenue. And we need to start doing that.
And I think
Mayor Pro Tem.
I just want to do a time check. It's 10 o'clock, and may want to consider if council would like to extend beyond the 11 p.m.
Oh, right. 10 o'clock.
I move we extend the meeting to 11.
Second.
No, the meeting, the question is, you need to determine now whether or not you can conclude this item
By 11.
by 11.
Oh, I don't know. Haven't gotten any of my questions.
Okay, what time is?
Oh, that's our new policy.
And recognizing that we have a deadline to approve a budget of June 30th, it's a two-step process tonight, and then in 2 weeks, June 23rd. So if we don't conclude the work tonight, then an additional meeting will need to be scheduled besides the 23rd to be that second step, correct? And that would need to occur before the 30th of June.
Yeah, our goal is to get all the input from council tonight on the budget and the CIP, so we can package up the final recommended budget for adoption on June 23rd, and all the other related documents that go with that.
Okay.
Did you guys think we can do all of that today?
Christine has questions.
I don't think we have a choice. And I don't like not having a choice. Next year, it'd be really nice if we could start this earlier.
Yeah.
And we've already talked about doing that earlier. I don't know that if we can finish by 11, but I think we can finish today.
Well, I mean, the discussion is just to decide, do you think you can, finish it by 11? And if you can't, my read of the consensus is that it's going to be extended. So That's all. Our protocols just require at 10 to have this discussion. Doesn't mean you have to vote on it or anything at this point. If you're going to try and
It's when it
conclude
gets
by
to 11, we have to make that motion.
Right, and then you'll make that motion at 11 if you need to continue it.
Okay. So Mayor Pro Tem Bowles, you have the floor.
Okay, well, originally I was going to go through and start with how the staff report was laid out, but Greg was talking about housing, and I'm really concerned about the Housing Action Fund, and so I thought maybe I would start there instead.
Okay.
If that's okay. I'm really worried about taking $1 million out of that budget. And this really is for affordable housing. Affordable housing is the hardest housing to build. And that's my understanding of our goal when we set up that fund, because we've built no affordable housing in 30 years. Talking about the reorganization of economic development is another thing, but there's money in here that's just what I think is normal planning work, like $100,000 for on-call planning services for housing implementation. That should not be from the housing fund. The cracking down on from HCD is especially going to come about affordable housing, because that low income and very low income are extremely hard to build, and without city helping with some of that financially, it's not going to help. We're not going to get there. And we do have interested nonprofit developers, at least 2 in this town, that we need to be investing in to try to move these projects forward so that we can start to build these very low income and low income housing units. And we just have a terrible track record on that. So anyway, that's one big thing. Do
you have a suggestion?
Well, I just think the money's going to need to come from somewhere else, and we need to look at the funding. And
I'm just curious if you had thought about where it would come from.
And that particular one, well, that's where I was going to go in line by line, but I'm just kind of talking in general right now. But that particular one, I think, was low, like 6th goal in terms of the planning department. So maybe it's not a necessary position. We have someone from Hart. We have a 2-year PBF fellow that's free. So we've brought in other housing resources that are helping with their ongoing work. And I didn't even know we had this other Civic Well fellow that's apparently already in the budget, right? So that's 3 housing people that are additional to the staff that we've been paying for. So I'd really like to see us really look carefully at that money. Paying 60% of an economic development person's salary on housing, that really bothers me too. I mean, there's one thing about, a marketing and economic development person who's talking to developers and trying to bring projects in, but economic development's about a lot more than housing. And Kevin said he'll bring this later, but I mean, I even asked that question when we had the economic opportunity studied, because housing costs a lot in services, right? I mean, you can look at the money on property tax that you might make, but we're going to have to pay more police and fire and roads and park and rec, and all that. So, data I've been given from someone who works in this field is that residential, actually, for every dollar you spend, actually costs $1.16. So it concerns me that we're putting the few resources we have into economic development for housing. That's not to say someone shouldn't be working with the developers and trying to bring projects here, but the skills to bring affordable projects here are very different than the skills to bring just any developer into town too. So I'm not sure that person would even have those skills. And then to just take that money out of the housing fund, that's $1 million out of the $3 million that we've worked really hard to put in that fund, and that we need for things like the PRC and the temporary safe parking program for our most vulnerable residents. So I'd really just like us to think very carefully about that money.
If I could offer a couple clarifications just regarding the economic development and housing manager position. So, Vice Mayor Bowles, you mentioned, affordable housing developers. That's an extremely complex industry. The person on city staff that will be working with them is the economic development and housing manager position. That's the goal of that position, is to have staff expertise that is very knowledgeable about affordable housing development as well as economic development. This is a trend that has been happening in cities in their economic development programs. And
Some examples, because I haven't seen that anywhere. So this is where it's like it's completely new to me.
I believe Ms. Carter has examples of that. The other thing that I wanted to comment on, because it was made in public comment, and then you just said something about every dollar you put into housing development costed more than $1. That's not true at all. So the revenue generation from development and redevelopment, whether it's just housing or mixed-use development with housing, far exceeds what that costs. And again, we'll go into specific examples and analyses of that in the revenue study session later in the summer. But I just want to kind of dispel that myth.
I was searching for that, and I'm not finding that data, and I asked for it before with the economic officer. So again, if you're asking us to put this money that we don't have in this position, I want a little bit more confidence that it's the right.
Yeah, and so the only, let me explain more the rationale about the economic development and housing reorganization and manager position. So the affordable housing development needs that staff focus. And we can't afford a housing expert in community development nor in the city manager's office. So that's why we're consolidating the two, and they do directly relate to each other. So when you are talking about economic development, you're talking about redevelopment and housing development, mixed-use development in some cases, and that all is in the category of economic development for the city because it's revenue generation. And so that's it's up for council's decision and discussion for sure, but I just want to explain my recommendation about it, is that is the trend and the focus that Pacifica needs to move this ball forward. And, actually have some things built.
And my other concern.
And if I can add to this, so to city manager's point that it is a current trend in our neighboring communities. So I'm looking at the city of Belmont, city of Burlingame, city of San Carlos, and city of South San Francisco have some kind of equivalent of housing and economic development manager position.
Belmont, Burlingame, South San Francisco.
Belmont, Burlingame, San Carlos, and South San Francisco.
San Carlos, okay. Well, I'm going to reach out to those council members and see what we can learn if it's working, right?
And I want to add that all the cities are about Pacifica size or a little bit smaller. So to city manager's point, it's a consolidation of two essential functions.
I just wanted to add on one of the questions from prior, we had Fund 293, the housing successor, there is $372,000 fund balance in there, and that's earmarked for low and moderate income housing projects, and that can be done out of that fund or moved to another fund for those specific projects, but right now it's segregated to keep that separation.
Right. Yeah, I made a note of that. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, and the mixed use, I'm really concerned about, just seeing our housing element and all these sites that we've zoned mixed use, but, the planning commission meeting, we're only requiring 0.1% of the square footage to be mixed use. And if they're, if they have the certain number of affordable housing units, they don't have to provide any. So, anyway, I don't think housing is going to solve all of our problems. And also, we're not going to be able to, the way just the construction industry is now, with the costs and the tariffs and, all the things going on with the LA fires and all the demand, we're not going to get a lot built in the next 3 years. So like putting all this money into that bucket without thinking about where we might need it in other buckets is part of what concerns me. And then actually just digging further into that, so I was going back and looking at the housing element implementation. There's other things that we should be doing, including working on funding a housing action fund, which is not in here, and that would take money and a study, and that is supposed to be done by 2026. So if we're looking at taking money out of here, I want to make sure we're working on a study to put money back in, because we've just said we can't do that with the funds that we've been putting in the last 2 or 3 years. So how are we going to replenish this? And that's something that we have told HCD we're going to do by 2026. So where is that in our budget and planning? And then the other, my understanding with the public sites, and this wasn't really answered, so was HEI 3 was, can you clarify what sites we're talking about doing this analysis for $150,000?
Certainly, I'll ask Community Development Director Upgrave to come up and speak to that.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Samantha Updegrave, Community Development Director. The work on housing element implementing Program 3 includes all of the public sites, publicly owned sites that are listed and beginning that work. So that includes state-owned sites, school district sites, and the city-owned sites. And it's the beginning of that planning process.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, because I'd only heard talk about the Sanchez Library and the Sanchez Art Center, and then that also includes the Caltrans Park and Ride, which is an economic opportunities site also. So
That's correct.
I'm glad to hear there's more than that. And the school district had also talked about going through their Surplus Land Act, right, as part of.
That's correct. So we'll be looking at all of those public sites that are listed.
Okay. And then can you answer the Housing Action Fund, why that's not something that we're looking at now to try to replenish that fund?
I do believe we are looking at it. We're working with HART on a number of our housing element programs, and I believe that is one of the areas where they're providing assistance.
Okay. I also know, just from having spoken to our PBF fellow, she has a lot of experience with what LA has done that has been brought in a lot of money to their Housing Action Fund. So, yeah, I mean, again, if we're spending this money, we need to immediately be looking at how to replenish it. And then the inclusionary housing program also was supposed to be done by the end of this year. Is that something that is included in your budget already?
HART is also helping, also working on our inclusionary housing element. The city is also part of a multi-jurisdictional nexus study that's a larger project that I believe they're selecting a consultant in July. So that's coming up and that will be kicking off. And that's going to help us with our in lieu fees. And so we're looking at potentially having, so HART is working on that. They're one of our partners in that as well. And so we're looking at, are there changes and cleanups that we can do to our current inclusionary housing ordinance now? And then do the bigger reorganization, looking at the in lieu fees, utilizing the information from this multi-jurisdictional nexus study that we're a part of.
Okay. And to some of the questions that were being brought up by the public, I mean, is there an option that we decide we don't accept in lieu fees? Would that?
You mean legally? I don't know. I would have to research that more.
Okay.
But in lieu fees are one of the ways that you build housing funds to provide, a portion of an affordable housing financing stack from the city. So that is, I believe, one of the primary ways that cities typically fund their available funding.
Yeah, and like it was said, that hasn't worked in Pacifica, I don't think, ever. But, okay. And then the objective design standards, that's not something that is needed extra funds for, or is that part of?
The objective, the zoning reform, objective design standards, and permit processing and streamlining is the project that the PBF Fellow grant was awarded for.
Okay.
Christine,
Go ahead.
Greg has a light on, and the city manager, I think, wanted to respond to something about.
Oh,
in
yeah,
lieu
I
fees.
was just going to comment that, the city hasn't compiled very many housing in lieu funds because no housing has been built.
Correct.
We have like a 1% housing build rate since the 80s or something.
Right.
So therefore, we don't have any housing in lieu funds.
Right.
Yeah, but the one we do have was a bad example of, yeah, I think. Okay.
Really quick, Christine, I was going to say it would be super helpful for me to sit down with Armando from Hart to understand everything that they're doing, and
Yeah,
perhaps that can be something that
Yeah.
we can do too.
Thank you, that would be really helpful.
So I'm going to give it over to Greg for a minute.
Yep.
And then you
That's
think
my
about,
housing alley.
okay, Greg.
I just wanted to tell Christine I share some of her concerns, and I very much look forward to working with all of you on coming with ideas when we do this discussion in the fall about how do we bring in more revenue to address the revenue side of this. I know I put over $10 million worth of ideas on Kevin's desk already and been dying to have this conversation. Like, for example, Kevin, the Sharp Park specific plan, is that not more or less a mixed-use, giant mixed-use development?
It's not approved yet.
I might ask Ms. Upgrave about the specifics on that, but yes, that's intended. Many of the designs in there are tended to be ground level commercial and housing, and I think some density bonus and affordable housing related bonuses is what I'm remembering from that.
Which is outside of the housing element, but inside the housing element at the same time. But there is a significant portion of commercial space required for that, more than 1%. Is that correct?
That's right. And in addition, I mean, the specific plan is a very basic economic development tool for the city in terms of bringing in additional revenue, because you're revitalizing an entire neighborhood and drawing more people in, as well as building housing for those people to live in, and then they can frequent the retail establishments.
What percentage of our revenue is sales tax?
Approximately 6% is the sales tax, Bradley Burns sales tax, and then another 6% is our transactions and use tax, Measure Y revenue. So it's about a total of 12%.
And if we were to build, say, 300 hotel rooms, how much TOT tax would that potentially represent?
Well, so I would guess that would be about $3 million a year of additional TOT tax to the city, give or take some. That's an estimate.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have for now.
Thank you very much. So it's almost 10:30. I think it would be beneficial for us to zero in on what are the specific questions or debates that we need to have on the recommendations that have been brought forward. And also, I want to make sure we talk about FogFest, because that's something that's been on my mind after our whatever council meeting it was when we talked about that. So,
I'm a yes on FogFest.
We need to talk about it.
From where,
Right.
that's the harder question.
Yeah, the from where.
it has to be a from where,
Yeah.
right, since it's not in the budget.
I would look to staff's recommendation as to the from where.
I think we're supposed to give.
No,
her-
they gave us, they punted the ball to us,
Yeah, I think we have to.
if you recall.
Can we just ask, like, maybe there's a few places we can save some money, and I think I found another bit of money that we can possibly take from too. And I want to talk about one shoreline for that too.
Thank you.
So just to go down the expenditure request really quickly, you know, $150K for the shoreline adaptation. I don't know, maybe we can say 100, and we're really trying to look for grants. You know, we don't have that program designed yet. We haven't talked about what in the world the public engagement process would be like. You know, if we get our VLF fees back later, you know, we'll have another $2 million that we can pick from. I'm just trying to find little bits of money, right? So that's one suggestion.
Is there some opportunities, so like, does 150 represent, like, that's the cost of a staff person and 100,000 doesn't get you a staff person?
It's, okay, no,
It's
Kevin.
And I'll ask Ms. Upgrave to come up and maybe talk more specifically about, but the 150 for the Shoreline Adaptation Fund is a lower number than what the department request was to kickstart the Shoreline Adaptation Plan process. It includes, you know, the consultant to design the engagement and start the process, which is probably necessary to at least the design part to help with grant applications. And then it also includes the Coastal Access Resiliency Program work, which is going to require, there's, I think, some funding in there is for various technical studies that may need to be related to those. So again, it's a placeholder dollar amount. It's reduced from what the initial thinking was from staff in order to balance. And so if we reduce it further, and with that 150, I'm saying that we're going to need grant applications, successful grant applications to carry out this process, because it's a multi-year, very expensive process for sure. But in terms of kickstarting the process and what essential work needs to be done, you know, that's our estimate, and if council wanted to reduce it, then we would work with that. And if Ms. Updegrave has any additional comments, that would be great.
I was hoping you were just going to come sit down.
Yes, city attorney pointed out that I might be up and down a lot. Thanks for bearing with me while I get organized. The money for that, we're anticipating pretty high levels of public engagement moving into that process, which is very expensive. So holding workshops, doing things outside of just a traditional study session. And so this is our seed money to get started on that, to hire a public engagement consultant, start working on those things, start framing out all of the things that we'll need to do, what all of the milestones are. And I guess it's more of our seed money because we will be applying for grants and looking for grant money. Is a very, you know, as City Manager Woodhouse said, is a very long-term project. And then also capturing some cost savings by combining some of the public engagement for the Shoreline Adaptation Program and the Coastal Access and Resiliency Plan. I think those two things fit really nicely together in the beginning as we're starting to work through our public engagement strategy. So we found some cost savings there too, and kind of in combining those.
Okay. Are you going down the page on packet page 74?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I understand it's not very well defined, and thank you for that explanation. And as Cindy said, we put it in, and then, we'll see as things, evolve, and we're getting proposals, and we hopefully have a little more direction to give about, what kind of engagement we think is important. So district-based financing, I'm okay on. The fee study, I'm okay on. Anybody else? The economic development person, I'm still not okay on. But yeah, the only one I was going to ask about was the library marketing, because somewhere I saw that there was $50,000 left over in their budget from this year, page 99 or 158 maybe. So do we need another 50,000? And what are they doing with that? And what is the timeline for the goal? Are we giving 50,000 every year until this comes to a bond?
It sounds to me like that was the recommendation. There was something I read later in the packet about, it was originally 50,000, but the recommendation was to make it an ongoing allocation. Is that accurate?
Well, it does say ongoing, but it's really 50,000 in this next year, and then we need to see, where that effort is going until we lead up to a successful, bond measure to fund new libraries. Then that's when that would end. And City Clerk Coffey, who's leading the effort related to the libraries, can really speak to the scope of work for the marketing and work that's being done.
And the current amount in their budget? Right? Have we not given them money before? Has that all been spent?
No, we have funded that money before, and it's running out. And so if we want to continue that effort, we need more money for it.
City Clerk Coffey, did you want to add some color to that?
So the city currently has an agreement with Berg Davis public relations firm that has been used along the process for the Pacifica Libraries Modernization Project. And it's a firm that's familiar with the city's engagement and strategy for new library facilities, new and renovated library facilities for Pacifica. They are working closely with staff and with the Library Advisory Committee to assist with materials and strategy and engagement to bring public awareness and support for the project in order to culminate in polling for a potential bond measure. A bond measure would be necessary for construction funding for new and renovated libraries. So without significant public engagement, it wouldn't be feasible to expect community awareness and support that would culminate in a successful bond measure.
But I guess I'm not quite clear on, we have a committee that's working on this too, I know that there are things that you're handing out, and, I'm not sure if anything's been mailed, what.
The Library Advisory Committee is a committee of volunteers that is appointed by the City Council, and the purpose of the Library Advisory Committee is really to be a Brown Act committee that provides transparency to the public so that we have, public meetings monthly that the public can attend, and kind of as the grassroots and stakeholders. There's ex officio members in terms of the Pacifica Families Club and the Pacifica School District that provide valuable insight both to and from the community on the project, and the public relations firm, provides kind of that expertise in terms of creative engagement. They assist with hosting the project website that brings awareness of the project and updating that website, as well as producing materials. A new postcard for engagement was recently produced. And we're working on producing stickers and bookmarks that were the product of a contest, a community contest for that. So they're really the ones that are providing the expertise as far as, public relations and engagement.
And the committee's providing the woman and manpower of tabling, outreach, helping develop content for the website and for the social media campaign, but Burke Davis is having the overview, the big picture communications plan.
And Sarah, is it a different contractor who does the polling?
Yeah, the polling,
FM3.
the polling is separate, and the most recent polling that was done in 2023, 2024 was not just focused on the library project itself, but also with other potential, potential bonds for other city infrastructure.
That's right.
Engaging, the public support for that.
Thank you.
And so just under the summary of fund balances on page 105, it says the projected fund balance at the end of June for the Pacifica Library Fund 331 is $53,000. So that's where I'm asking, is there money in here? Do we need another $50,000 this year if you already have that? Or are you saying that you need $100,000 for this consultant?
The ask is for $50,000 total for the fiscal year.
But is it needed this year if there's more than $50,000 in the budget?
I'd have to turn to finance for that. I know that there were some transfers between funds. There was with the new ERP system, they broke out a city clerk's budget from city manager's office. So I'm not sure if what you're seeing is something in how it was transferred.
Sure, so I can speak a little bit to that. Since the request is ongoing, the request came from the general fund because the Pacifica Library only has a $53,000 balance, and it won't be able to support this ongoing request. However, if the council so directs, they can direct for the one-time portion from this year to be covered by that funding source.
So it needs $100,000 a year is what I'm hearing?
No, there is no current expenditure budgeted out of that Pacifica Library Fund. So there's no 25, 26 activity.
I guess I can add to that the request was made to come from, I believe, the city clerk's division budget, or that came out of the city manager's office rather than hitting the library fund itself.
That's all above my head.
Is it a transfer from the city manager's budget into the city clerk's budget?
No, the current request is budgeted in general fund. Because it was originally thought as ongoing process. So the library fund could only accommodate 1 year limited term allocation. So what Marisol said that it would be, if the council wants to redirect this funding for 1 year to library fund, that's one of the policy decision. And we can charge the library fund instead of general fund.
Oh.
So you have 53,000 available to Ms. Ball's point, 53,000 in the library fund.
Is that from the original money that Don Horsley allocated?
I believe so. I believe that's from the Measure A funds that were allocated towards that.
So can we do that? And we can save this $50,000 for some of the other funding requests?
Well, I mean, yes, we can make that request or direction. I think probably we'll have to have a mid-year or a next year or whenever conversation about budget for polling at some point, which is not 50,000.
Right.
So,
Could we at least fund some of it
No, she's saying
maybe
there's
not
money,
do the whole,
there's
take the
money
whole
in there.
50
We're
away.
not taking the money away.
It has money already.
I'm just saying it won't show up as a previous funded on next year's budget. It would be nice to keep a placeholder, even if we only give them a smaller amount.
Can't we just reallocate the OPEB money?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit more about motor pool too, and
The OPEB trust contribution, we could just take the $25,000 out of that
yeah, I'm okay
for
with that.
Fog Fest.
There's,
Yeah.
there's an extra 1.3 million too in here.
Where?
So, that was one of my questions that I had asked, that, because there's a certain minimal amount that we have to keep in, but there's a little bit more that we can use. I mean, we've tended to have a higher balance. I'll let Yulia address that.
I know that we're short, but I would like to see some money putting into beautification. Because I noticed that most of the beautification committee bring in their own plants and stuff like that. So, and I do want to beautify the city. It's something that I do care. If we want to bring tourism here, I would like to see some money putting into beautification.
Do you have an amount?
I would say 20,000.
And what would you take that from?
Well, from the library allocation that we have, the 50,000 from the library.
I think we have to be careful of just coming here and, 'cause, I mean, that's the whole reason of having goal setting, right? Of having ideas
Right.
of where money goes.
Correct.
So I'm not
Yeah.
sure if this is the right.
Especially with our
Yeah.
committees and
And
commissions.
to
Yeah.
answer your question, your point, what has happened, I know when I was the liaison for BAC, the funding source was Department of Public Works. That's who paid for the plants that went into various city projects. So it was not that they weren't supplied, it was just not a allocation to BAC as a budget. It was Department of Public Works.
So I had to ask them if they have any money allocated for beautification? Or at least I would like to see some money. It doesn't have to be 20, but maybe 10,000. Actually, beautification is very important to me because if we want to bring tourism here, I feel like the city is not well taken care of. And that is important.
Well, that would probably be something we should talk about at goal setting, because I don't think it's been delineated here, right?
No. And I don't.
And it may be part of the economic, community development, economic manager function. It may be something that comes out of that.
Yeah, I'm super happy to talk about that, but I don't think it should be part of this conversation.
There are many things that shouldn't be here and it's here. And I do, like I said, it is, everyone has their priorities. I do have my priorities too, and I would like to see money dedicated to clean up, beautifying the city, especially the places where people come to visit us. That we don't. People always are saying that the city's not taken care of. Yes. So a lot of people are saying that the city is not well taken care of. And I would like to see some money devoted to clean up, putting new plants, mulch, whatever is needed.
Well, if I may, what you're talking about is staff time. And that's not something that we have money for. And so BAC, as you know, having been part of as the liaison and participating, is providing a workforce to supplement and supplant and support what city staff really are stretched too thin to do. So I hear what you're saying about improving, beautifying, and making the city more welcoming, but that the reality is that comes at a cost. It's a priority, but when you say it's not maintained, it's not cleaned up, who does that is Public Works. And as Greg pointed out earlier tonight, we are 30 positions short because we can't afford the staff that we need to do all the things that we would wish to have done.
What I'm saying is that, do we have a budget for beautification advisory committee? So if they said, I want to plant some plants.
They don't. We don't. The only
No.
committee that has any budget is economic development.
Okay.
So.
And that's why I said the costs that have been incurred have come out of Department of Public Works. They funded it out of departmental budget.
So let's do some more research for next year. I mean, I hear you, too. So I want to go back to this extra 1.3 million. So this is on packet page 76. It talks about the general fund balance of 10.1 million, but the GFOA, and I forget what that stands for, but has an $8.8 million minimum. So staff confirmed there is an extra 1.3 million that we could potentially spend, but there are risks in that, right? Because the budget is just a guesstimate budget that's not fully accurate too. So we want to make sure we don't go below.
Yeah, maybe the answer was misinterpreted here. So what is being presented to you is a structurally balanced budget. So right now, all the options that you're considering are operating expenses. So if you were, and you're correct, so the minimum balance that recommended by GFOA is $8.6 whatever million this amount is, which represents only 2 months of operating expenditures, right? So that's a bare minimum that most cities have more than that. But what I want to point out that even if you were to allocate this 1.3 million difference, your budget would be still structurally imbalanced because you're still considering the operating cost. So your operating costs, operating revenues, and operating expenditures should match. And that wouldn't be the case. The only exception to this rule or best practice is if you were to allocate the fund balance towards the capital programs. That would be, cities do that, right? And when they constructed the civic project, the civic center, that was one of the decisions that council made at that time. So allocation towards like investment into infrastructure is acceptable use of fund balances. But all the other uses for operating costs, even if they were one time, it would still make the budget structurally imbalanced.
Okay, so there was money we were allocating to capital projects, like the $50,000 for the annex lighting. So can we take that out of this, and then we have that $50,000?
Well, we already not
No,
counting
that's not
allocation
being
towards
funded.
capital.
We did already.
Towards
Okay.
this. So that's why it sits on a separate line. We only compare operating expenses, operating revenues. And you have a balance on the previous chart, you have a balance of 57,000. That's available for your discretion right now before you start unfunding other things, right? So you have 57,000 to allocate, whether it's Fog Fest or One Shoreline or any additional programs.
Okay.
But if you want to fund more than that, we recommend to unfund or reallocate some other uses.
And then what's not in here yet, just we all know, but the public doesn't know, are labor negotiations, which are not in this budget yet either, which might also have additional cost implications.
Well, correct, and we are planning to use some salary savings for that, down the road. So the budget does include fully funded salaries and benefits currently.
Counselor, we're at 10:50 p.m. Motion to extend if needed.
So moved.
To what time, Greg?
About midnight. You can make a motion to get us out of here sooner.
Mayor?
I think we need to wrap this up, personally. We're like looking around at, well, maybe this, well, maybe that. We have a recommendation from the city manager. Either we agree with the things that he's put forward or we don't. So my thought would be, 11:30. That's 40 minutes. Additional.
Then so moved.
Thank you. I'll second that.
With the motion made to extend the meeting to 11:30, made by Councilmember Wright, seconded by Mayor Beckmeyer, passes unanimously.
So Christine, it sounds like the thing you're not happy about, not thinking is a good allocation of funds, is $150,000 for the shoreline adaptation program, or did you change your point of view?
That's okay. I mean, I
Okay.
think we'll look for grants. That's okay.
Right, and I do think that's seed money. I don't even think that's even close to what it's going to cost us by any
This
stretch.
is in 1 year, right?
Right.
We're not talking about the whole cost of it.
100%. And then you have concern about using housing funds toward the economic and housing development reorganization
And also.
recommendation.
And also the on-call planning services, which, again, maybe community development, Updegrave can talk about this, but that was like, I think, a 6th priority on your budget. Is that something that we need, especially given our other housing implementation helpers, partners that we're working with now? So that was on page 78, but I think there's a breakdown sheet on another, which is where it shows your priority. I forget what page that's on.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Bowles. The reason why we're requesting a specific allocation is because the housing element and the housing element implementation work has taken much longer, I think, than was initially anticipated. And we've been finding that, we're drawing additional money from our consulting services focused on housing element work that is then causing us to come back for amendment after amendment on our contracts. And so what we're looking for is some specific allocation so that we have a clear dedicated budget and tasks related to that work to help support the ongoing programming and implementation.
I do have a lot of sympathy for Samantha with a lot of new staff and a big state mandated task on her.
And what is the Civic Well Fellow going to be doing? Is it that person also working on housing element implementation?
The Civic Spark Fellows that we've requested for this coming fiscal year are related to the LCLUP implementation and the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan Task Force.
But I was just told 50,000 for a Civic Spark Fellow was coming out of the housing fund that had already been
I
allocated.
believe that might have been for last year, or I'll turn that over to Assistant Manager.
It was original allocation when we first had the Civic Spark Fellow, and the existing allocation in the base budget is for implementation of the housing element and also that particular project. So at mid-year, we will revisit this again and see what work was completed and what any unused portion would be returned back to the fund balance. So essentially, that's how this works. And as we are getting closer to the closing the fiscal year, we will again have the opportunity to clean up and see if there is any unused funds that would have to be returned.
Yeah, so that still concerns me. I mean, again, that fund we put aside for affordable housing, and it's being used for a lot of other things, right?
Well,
And.
like the temporary safe parking program.
Well, no, I'm talking about things that are in this budget right now, not that we approved already.
I believe all the recommendations for the Housing Action Fund are related to housing.
Right, but not all affordable housing, right?
Well, so if you're focusing on housing development, then there's a part of that that is affordable housing because there's the BMR requirement. So, I mean, we could, talk semantics about that, but, it's all, the more housing you build, affordable housing technically versus the more housing you build, then economically, more of it should be affordable over time. So this is a council. There's no hard and fast, policy or requirement related to it. It's, primarily focused on affordable housing efforts. A lot of the housing element work is really focused on affordable housing in the housing element implementation, and just as well as housing.
And if I may add to that, even, housing, the program 3, looking at the public sites, much of that is dedicated to low and lower income.
Yeah, I'm okay with that
units.
one, with that 150,000. It's, the other implementation has a lot of other things. And then the economic development person's doing, we have a 100% economic development person who's not doing housing now, so 60% of her salary is now going to housing. I don't know if she's qualified to do housing. And then this other positions, and 246,000 of salaries that are coming out of the housing fund, right? That, I don't know, that it bothers me. I understand what you're trying to do. I'm not sure that.
It sounds to me like what you want is those dollars to be going toward matching funds for actually building affordable housing.
And helping our current only nonprofit that wants to build housing and shelter, right? Not just to build, but to plan for, to buy land for, right?
Right. So my point is, it seems to me that that person, that developer, whoever it is that that I don't, has to work with somebody in staff. And my understanding of this position is that's who they would be working with. Maybe I'm missing that, but that's the idea of the housing as an economic driver. Now, I recognize that affordable housing is not a moneymaker per se. It's serving another purpose, right? We're meeting our arena. We're providing homes for people who can't afford to live in the Bay Area. I get it. So when you mentioned the other cities that are doing this type of a position, I know from being at Council of Cities that Belmont and San Carlos, I think you mentioned those two. I don't know what South City is doing per se, but those two for sure have developed these kinds of programs on city-owned land. And it seems to me that's where we're headed with this idea. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but that's what it seemed to me as I understood it and what I read in the staff report.
Right.
That's the vision of the position.
And I want to, again, emphasize that we are not repurposing the economic development program entirely. So we are just merging both priorities together. And that's the proven kind of trend in the neighboring cities. That's exactly what we are doing. And to your point about the allocations, so every year or even at mid-year, we can revisit the allocations. So this is a placeholder at this point. So keep in mind that if this recommendation is approved by you today or effective July 1, we will open the recruitment early in the fiscal year. We don't know how long will it take us to get this person on board, and it's going to be probably some moving target, right? So to see how the limited term position will coordinate with the high expertise manager and what the reality is going to be. So we'll revisit it at mid-year. So if the allocation 60-40, 40-60, 50-50 is a discussion, we can have this, we can come back to this conversation in mid-year or even the following year. But again, I want to emphasize that the focus is dual here. So economic development and support of business community and the housing programs as economic drivers, as well as district financing, district development and SLA process and all of this, all the strategic economic development initiatives that we have as part of economic opportunity study.
Okay, thank you. That makes me feel better. And I know we have some money we might be clawing back legally before the end of the 6-month period, too. Can we commit to working on the Housing Action Fund so that in this next year also, as part of this money, of bringing back where else we might look for money to build that fund? Because I don't see the ERAF coming back, right? Not anytime soon. And our disaster accounting fund, we're not funding from anywhere anytime soon either. So, you know, we've got to find some alternative sources of money. What worked in LA that I was told that brought in a lot of money was a tax on property sales over a certain value. For them, it was $4 million. It's not the person selling their home, it's the high-value properties, you know, and that.
A transfer tax.
A transfer tax, as an example, right?
And I believe transfer taxes are only available to charter cities.
Oh.
But City Attorney Kenyon, when she comes back,
And
can clarify that. Transfer taxes are only available to charter cities.
Okay. So we'll have to
Whatever it
keep
is.
looking.
Yeah, there's a bunch of possibilities outlined.
Well, and I mean, some of them are listed here.
And Samantha, you did say that we're working with Hart on the Housing Action Fund.
That's correct, Councilmember Beer. That is one of the things that we're working on the Heart with.
Yeah, and I think it's a good time for us to meet with Armando, Christina. I really want to.
Yeah, well, and actually, I mean, to that point, you know, the 100,000 for planning services, which are consultants, I mean, we're only paying a part-time Heart person now. Could we pay more of a Heart person, right, that really has that experience in affordable housing instead? Something to consider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about One Shoreline, and I want to talk about FogFest.
I do find it interesting that One Shoreline's asking for money when they're not even helping us that much.
Well, they're asking, I mean, their original funding to all the counties, to all the cities and the counties was on a certain program year, and it's expired. So
Got it.
they're trying to, you know,
Thank
stay accountable. They've only been asked to work on our seawall, and they didn't want to work on armoring. But there are other projects in town, and especially as we go to our shoreline adaptation and we need to look at nature-based solution, and, you know, there's flooding projects that they're interested in working on.
Great.
So I think that's money well spent because, yeah, their value would be a lot more than a $40,000.
And that's where
Get them
updates
working.
would be helpful for me to understand what One Shoreline's doing.
Right. I mean, we have to apply as a city, and that's not in process yet.
And they may be willing to fund studies for like doing a reef, for doing beach nourishment. There may be things that aren't armoring that they may be willing
Right.
to work towards, and doing a combination of armoring and natural adaptation stuff or things.
Yeah, but
Like
starting
the
to build that relationship, because we're going to need a lot more money and a lot more of their help, because our staff we don't have enough staff to work on all these projects either.
Right.
Right, so.
So Christine, are you proposing the 40,000 that, for
Yes.
this year?
Yes, yeah.
I would agree with that.
And I would go with that as well.
Okay.
Okay, me too.
Okay,
Can we
FogFest.
please take the FogFest money out of the?
Can I just
contribution?
circle back on the One Shoreline? Same question for FogFest, is to identify where the money is going to come from.
Okay,
Well, we have 50,000, right?
50,000 from the library, the reallocation of the,
No, there was 50,000 left over too. But less
Right,
maybe
you have
library money.
50,000 57,000 to be specific, 57,109 projected variance between operating revenues and expenditures available for allocation.
And we could potentially,
So together,
Take some of this
shoreline, One Shoreline and the Fog Fest would total to 65. You have 57, so you do need to make some.
So if we have 57, you could do 40 for One Shoreline and 17 for FogFest and call it even.
I would prefer to get to the 25 number for FogFest myself.
My issue with FogFest, I'm not opposed to giving them money, but we asked for this the last time, like, are they a nonprofit now? Right, they weren't last year when they asked for money. Having some, I mean, this was the first I had any accounting of the money that was given to, you're not allowed.
Are we opening public comment? Are you asking questions, or you're just
Well, I don't know.
posing rhetorical questions?
I was hoping that before, not just today, there would come a request and that some of these questions could be answered, so we had a little bit more information. I mean, yes, we gave them $25,000 last year, but we also wrote off another $50,000. So from the police expenses the year before.
I think I would like to say one thing, because we also have a liaison position to the Fog Fest that can't be filled. And so we can't fill it.
I'm sorry.
Because of
Can't fill it.
when the meeting.
Yeah, and so if we had a regular liaison, then that information would be shared and those questions could be answered. But we're not sending a liaison to the Fog Fest, so I think that's on us.
I hear you. Yeah. I would have just liked a little bit of a presentation, right, to understand what went last year and,
We do get a ton of value out of it, though, in terms of name recognition, bringing people from outside the city into the city, which serves us throughout the year. And I just see a ton of benefit in
No, I don't
supporting.
disagree, yeah. And I mean, I approved the $25,000 last year. And they were really struggling last year, right? But we have to really be mindful of every little $1,000, at this point.
Can we just take 8,000 then out of the OPEG trust contribution? So that we can give Fog Fest 25?
I would go along with that.
I would support that.
So I think we're done.
Can I suggest something? So if you do feel strongly about 25,000, then you're trying to find 8,000 variance, I would recommend reducing fire equipment fund allocation instead, because the OPEB trust contribution is actually based on the actuarial determined contribution. So we would rather fund it fully and get the
That
full
makes
credit.
sense.
So you want to take it out
Or
of
you
which
can
fund?
choose not to fund it, but we would not recommend to kind of chop it in,
Okay.
in portions.
You
Out
want,
of the fire equipment allocation for the,
why don't we take it out of the?
And I'm sorry, was there
motor
money
pool?
for the library? Could we just,
Oh,
Right?
right, so the alternative would be, correct, I apologize.
what were you
So
saying?
use the library fund for the library project, and that would free up 50,000 in the general fund. Yeah, sorry about not taking.
yes, we don't,
Yeah, we already figured that in.
no, I don't think
No,
we had.
no,
I
we
don't think
didn't.
she had. So,
Because we had the 57 left over.
Correct. So,
Right.
so if you give us direction to do that, then you don't need to reduce the allocation to fire.
let's do that.
Take the 8 out of the library?
So we would reallocate, instead of funding the library contract from the general fund, we would fund it for 1 year only from the library fund.
Oh, okay.
I thought we were doing that anyway.
Is 8,000
Well,
enough?
we were talking about it, but she hadn't actually.
It's plus the 17, so it'd be
Oh.
25.
And can I just, while the Fog Fest people are here, like next year, can you do a presentation to us and explain, like, again, your nonprofit status? Because I know, like, all the other groups that we fund are nonprofits, and so there's, financial accountability and so forth through that. So I just like to have a little bit more information. And then just don't wait till the last minute to ask for money. So staff can figure it in.
Once again, we are not sending a
I
liaison to these
understand.
meetings. Okay, so maybe it's not last minute. Maybe we didn't ask them. I think that there's a little disconnect for you there, and so maybe it would be a good idea for us to get together with the FogFest board so you can just understand better so you don't feel that disconnect.
Okay.
That makes sense to me. So, Yulia and Marisol, can I ask you, do you feel you have
We do.
an understanding of where to get the money for 40,000 for One Shoreline and 25 for FogFest?
Yes. we do.
Great. And Mayor Pro Tem, with regard to the Economic and Housing Development Reorganization item, in the city manager's recommendations. Are you willing to allocate those funds at this point?
I mean, I don't think I have a choice, right? So, and we're going to see it when it comes back, and we'll see who we get to hire. I'm just, yeah, as long as we're working on the Housing Action Fund this year, too.
And one thing we didn't talk about that was brought forward in public comment, and I would like to ask staff about, is the short-term rental administration, 75,000 ongoing
Oh, yeah.
for code enforcement inspections. Is that not a cost that is passed off to the short-term rental?
It will be an
Process.
additional cost. Well, if you remember, our STR permit fee is over 1,600 right now. So with the reduction of the allowable rent to 60 days, I don't think we have much room to increase that permit fee. And the cost that is presented to you, that's a hard cost. That's an actual quote that we are getting from HDL and the code enforcement piece of it that would actually cost to enforce the new ordinance. So the numbers are real. So it's not us guessing it. It's pretty much the number that we got. And as far as I've said in revenues, I don't think we have a lot room here to charge short-term rentals when they're only allowed to rent 60 days now. But we're happy to revisit it again and again. We are going to be doing the user fee study, so that's going to be the fee to look at together with all the other fees.
I would also add that the inspection requirements that council directed be added to the ordinance for the permit will need to be done by building inspectors. So that is an additional cost for our consultants.
But again, I think the intention was for that. I mean, that is part of their permit renewal. So it seemed when we were talking about it before that it could be an additional fee that we charge them, right? Because it's the inspection and the time.
Right, but the restrictions are so strict, so I think we might be at the point that it will be cost prohibitive for us to do this enforcement. But again, we will have to look into this more closely. With only, well, again, I don't want to reopen the STR conversation here, but the limitations here might be, the revenues might be exceeding the cost. I mean, the other way around, the cost might be exceeding the revenues.
Yeah, I would add to that conversation that I think the enforcement cost of the program is going to be at least that amount of money in the future once the ordinance is adopted and it's implemented and we have some experience with it. And as we do the cost allocation study, the council could consider looking at the STR permit fees, currently $1,600, and make a decision in the future to raise those to some level to recompense some of that cost. But the ordinance isn't even adopted yet, so we're not in a spot to make that analysis and recommendation.
Well, one thing that I do believe is with the changes we discussed in the ordinance and the increase in requirements of operators, there are some operators in the city who are not going to want to play. And that is going to require code enforcement to help them understand, no, really, we're not kidding. And I think that's going to be perhaps, to your point, tapering off over time. But for that first year, I think there is going to need to be some vigilance, and that costs money. So.
I just realized we didn't get to the CIP thing at all.
Well, when it comes to CIP, the thing I'm most concerned about is continuing to upgrade our wastewater system, which is what I believe in public comment earlier about the beach and the bacterial load in the creek and such. we are making those investments now. I want to see us continue with that. That seems programmed in. And then I want to fix that bridge. I know we're looking for a grant that's not funded, because that would be a general fund transfer, which we don't have,
It's like 350,000, isn't it?
right?
Mm-hmm.
But
So, yeah, part of my issue with the CIPs is just going through all those sheets, and a lot of them haven't been updated. Some of them, I think the projects are finished, and they don't say they're finished. Some of them say they're funded, but we're not doing anything. And maybe I can just meet with staff separately. Like, for me, I want to have a good handle on all this, because then I'm like trying to find money for things, right? And
my experience with the CIP budget, when I finally grasped how it works, was how disappointing it was when I kept seeing projects that I thought I really liked and was excited to see them in here, and then the status was unfunded, unfunded. So, yeah. No, I think if there are,
Can't wait for that fall discussion.
I know, if there are questions that are specific, and then in the course of your conversation with staff, Mayor Pro Tem, if you think it's something that bears bringing to the council for a little study session, for us to all go over it, I would have no objection to that.
Yeah.
I
I'd be very
think
much in
being
favor.
more conversant
right,
about
now
our,
it's too late for me now to really think
yeah,
about this
I
intelligently.
think that would,
But like one of the things I pointed out, like one of them is about the Clarendon drainage improvements, and it only talks in here about adding a new pipe, but I know our drainage study called for adding a new pump station, right? So that information is not in here, right? So it's just because I'm remembering it in other places, but it would be
Right.
really helpful to have all this information in one place so we know what the project entails, and we can, look for sources of
But
funding.
that's
and in addition to that, if there's a way of, how you have the projects related to council goals at the top? Oh, no, that's not in the CIP. That was on the other pages. The priority tracking and related to the council strategies and goals, and the general fund ones. On the CIP ones, if they could be tied and related to our climate action goals and if they're both, it might be both, our LCLUP actions, our adaptation strategies, et cetera, when we're looking at these CIP pages, we can see with a color code or a table at the top or something, how this particular capital improvement project relates to those other goals.
I can
Do you know?
speak a little bit to that. I know Assistant City Manager, myself, and Roland Yip did work on a template for the CIP book that's going to incorporate the goals on there, and it will check that off. So we're looking to probably roll that out after adoption. It takes a while to populate all of that with the new template, but there will be an updated template that has that information.
That sounds great, thank you. Okay,
So when do these sheets get updated normally about all these different projects?
Well, typically after adoption of the budget, we spend more time updating the budget than actually before it's published. And I believe, I don't want to speak for Public Works team here, but I believe they're actively working on it. We were just rushing this current format for the council, so you can review the draft. But once for the final budget, the new format will be created.
So all these individual sheets get published in the final budget?
They will have a little bit different look for the budget document. And I know Roland is here, so if I'm speaking out of terms, just correct me. I think the plan is still to use the new format for the adopted budget.
Okay.
Here comes Roland.
hi.
Hi, Roland.
Hi. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Roland Yip, Deputy Director of Public Works. That's correct, Assistant City Manager Carter, that we are rolling out the new CIP format book some of it's gonna, if you want to get a preview of it, the forms where all the projects and the descriptions is going to come and look a little bit like Half Moon Bay, and that's where Assistant City Manager Carter was working previously. And then some of the outputs is going to come from Daly City, and that's where I was before. So, some of the questions that are coming up is, how do these revenues and projections go out from each fiscal year? It's currently cannot be shown in our current spreadsheets. I mean, the summary sheets, they are what they are currently. We have to redo the whole book to do these other projections.
Okay.
But the one from Daly City and the consultant that we're working with, he's done these types of spreadsheets for over 200 agencies. So we will be able to get any kind of different outputs that we need, and a lot of it's going to come from how Daly City, and they do project it every single year. You can see your anticipated revenues along with your appropriations for all the fiscal years.
Oh, great.
Thank you, that's
Yeah.
super helpful.
What a gracious update, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, all ready for a motion.
To adjourn?
Is it a motion that we need to put these amendments in?
I don't believe so, because I think we got the direction, and we're clear on the direction and the funding sources for those added items.
Okay, so we don't need to vote on that?
No.
Great,
No, and we'll package this all up for budget adoption on the 23rd.
And it really is important that we have all of our different brains. And so I appreciate how your brain goes like this and remembers things, because mine doesn't. And so we need each other.
Well, and I appreciate how you're looking out for FogFest and what we're not doing right, instead of just what information we don't have, right? Thank you.
Councilmember Wright, your light is on. Would you like
old.
to speak?
Yes, I'd like to move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor, say aye. Meeting adjourned at 11:22.
Kimberly,